There's so many ways to enrich and build relationships. And I think podcasting opens up, just a plethora of ideas and ways to do this. What you shouldn't do, in my opinion, is do the interview, have it be published, and have that be the end of the story. That's the beginning of the story. 10% of this is getting on the right shows and doing a good job. 80-90% is all the stuff you can do with it after the fact. And I hope that's one of the things people take away from our conversation.
Welcome to Strategy in Action, where we reveal how industry leaders build real market gravity, the force that naturally attracts opportunities, partnerships, and profits. You get raw insights, proven frameworks, and strategies that actually move the needle in your business. Let's get started. Dustin Riechmann, welcome to the show.
Yes, Jason. Very excited to be here and happy to dive in with you.
Oh yeah, this is going to be fun. Bear with us, folks, because this is a chance for both of us to geek out on this idea of podcasting, both sides, the guesting, the hosting. I certainly come from the side, have a show. Honestly, what I tell people when they're like, should I have my own show? Should I be a guest on other shows? I'm like, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
And I agree. Yeah.
When you do both, there's an amazing combination to that. We can get into some of those details. But Dustin, having you on here, I want to give people geography before we dig into this idea. Our core topic today is going and being the guest on people's shows as a means of getting the word out there. That's certainly your specialty. Both, you did it for yourself first, right? You sold meat sticks doing this. So everybody, if you're thinking I don't know if my business will fit, it'll fit. Right? Give folks that geography just a little bit and how you're helping people do this right now.
Yeah. Do you want me to get into the sort of origin story of this and how it came into my life?
Yeah, please do that. Give folks, Dustin's got his program. That's what he does. It's for folks right now is helping people be guests and build their business around this. But yeah, give us that origin story of what brought you here in the first place out of that first experience of discovering it as a marketing play.
For sure. Well, I think it's important for people to understand I'm not at my core a marketing person. I don't actually come from a broadcast media, even business background. My professional background was actually in engineering. So I was a civil engineer, specifically a traffic engineer for 17 years. And throughout my career, really, most of that time, I had this entrepreneurial bug. And I was like, man, there's something here I want to do beyond this sort of day job and beyond the corporate career. So because of that, I had multiple online businesses that I ran as side hustles while I was an engineer. First one grew out of some marriage ministry work my wife and I were doing, and that brought me online, got me into writing and just learning how to market myself and, present ideas to strangers on the internet. And that pull really took hold of me. And for the second half of my engineering career, I was really getting deep into digital marketing. So 2018, I left engineering, became a full-time marketing consultant, just kind of helping anyone who needed some marketing help, built websites, did offers, messaging, those sort of things, all self-taught and learning from other experts, including some of your previous guests here on the show. And there's a couple-year period there where I was just doing that consulting work. And the meat sticks entered the equation here in that I ended up forming a partnership with one of my clients. So he was a butcher shop owner, had a really cool story. And he said, hey, man, can you sell stuff online? And I said, yes. What do you have in mind? And so we ended up forming this partnership for a brand that was called Fire Creek Snacks. And that was really pivotal because it pulled me into a whole different world where I started going to trade shows and selling into brick and mortar and wholesale and just kind of like a whole new world of marketing. That was really important. And then that intersected with March 2020 when I was driving to one of these, my 19th trade show actually up in Chicago. And I got a phone call that, hey, the Ace Hardware trade show has been canceled. I'm like, that's weird. So I come home and, we all know where we're at that time. And so for me, the whole marketing engine that was driving Fire Creek Snacks evaporated overnight. And I lost a good chunk, about 80% of my revenue from my consulting business because I was working with a lot of local businesses who were shut down. And so the good news is I said there's got to be some other way to access people, tell this story, get people to try out our product, even if I can't physically be in proximity to them. And so I got on my first podcast as a guest in the summer of 2020 in response to all of that. And it went really well. And we sold some meat sticks to strangers on the internet. And I was like, hey, there's something to this. And what I really started to realize is I started to build relationships and I started to have follow-up conversations. And so I just started doing that repeatedly coming out of 2020 into 2021. And we really resurrected that whole brand of Fire Creek, hit a seven-figure run rate without paid ads, which was pretty unusual in the e-commerce space at that time. Had some cool opportunities, got into Walmart, got a $500,000 purchase order from the biggest subscription box company in the country. All of that was coming from podcast guesting and then the relationships that were built there. So then, as the proverbial coaching journey goes, someone said, "Can you help me with that?" And I was like, "I guess." I've never really done coaching. I've never really tried to teach someone the stuff that I've been figuring out for myself, and it worked. And I started to help people and fast forward to today, the last 3 years, I've since exited that partnership with Fire Creek. I've, shut out all of the consulting clients, and my full-time focus now is this company's seven-figure leap. And our whole specific focus is working with coaches, consultants, and agency owners and helping them use podcast guesting as a way to generate high-quality leads and grow their business. So yeah, a lot of people are like, how'd you get into podcast guesting as like a thing? And I say, well, it was meat sticks, right? And they're like, how'd you get into meat sticks? I'm like, well, through marriage ministry, right? And it's like, so in reverse, it kind of makes sense. But that is how I became the quote unquote podcast guesting guy, as we sit here today, Jason.
Just one of those. Oh my gosh, I've heard it 100 times. The old engineer turned marketer turn marriage ministry turn meat stick turn podcast guesting story. Yawn.
Yeah. Hey kids, if you want to do this for a living, here's the path, right? Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's a course in a university down the road, I think right now. It's just like, here's the path to go. That is so awesome. I love the wild twisting turns of your background there. It's so fun, and I don't know, there's a piece as just a little sidetrack of lessons to pull from that is that idea of keep moving forward and keep following those threads.
Yes.
And you get a little pull, you get a little, like maybe the marriage ministry feels like off on a tangent because it's not necessarily the business part, but how critical was that, right? To dip your toe online and all. I love that stuff. And I think that's a lesson to pull out too, is to follow those and just dive in when you are following them, I think, as well. You brought up something, and I think we'll dive into it a little bit deeper later, but where I always start with promoting why have a show, right? Is the idea of, really building a show so that it grows your business, right? Bring on ideal clients, bring on strategic partners, and have that almost not a sales conversation by any means, but have that first conversation with somebody who could be a client. Your approach, we've talked about already, using podcast guesting to market your business and all of that. And yes to all of it. But something you touched on during that story as well are those relationships that get built. And again, that's the human part. This is for you and I know that's the fun part anyway. But also, it's also the business part too, because you had mentioned like some of those relationships that got you into those stores and grew your business more. It was because of those full relationships. It wasn't someone listened to the show and ordered 6 meat sticks, and it was deeper than that. Like, oh, you should meet so and so. Instead of skipping, let's dig into that just a little bit more, because for me, from day one, a decade ago when I started podcasting, like I still have dear, close, amazing friends from that to this day. And I don't think I even talk about that part enough. Let's stay there for a minute with this. And how has that shown up from way back then all the
Yep.
way to now and being a guest?
Yeah, I think the through line, that crazy journey, and I skipped many chapters of it for brevity. I think the through line is one thing I've always valued, and I think I've done very intentionally is what I would call planting relationship seeds, right? Like this idea that collaboration and partnership and serving other people first is always going to pay off in the long run, right? Like you reap what you sow, and you got to sow to reap. And so I think as a very specific example of this, in 2010, I met this guy named Tony. He had a marriage business. I had a marriage business. And even in the very early days of growing what became that brand, I was looking for collaboration. I said, I'm not the expert at everything. You guys are crushing it. In fact, they had one of the first podcasts, and now they have the largest marriage podcast in the world. And what I saw there, though, was the potential to partner. And I said, hey, why don't you come over here and be a guest expert on the platform I'm building? And he reciprocated. Tony and I basically kind of grew up throughout digital marketing, and I've helped him over the years to grow his business. In the very first cohort of the thing I now do for this business. He was been a big supporter. He's in my mastermind, and in fact, he's now one of our coaches that helps teach podcast guesting to people. 15, almost 16 years later, and so that's just one of thousands of examples of just the idea of relationship capital, nurturing relationships, being of service to other people without expecting something in return, but also realizing that the return always comes because of the law of reciprocity. So, yeah, I think that is the through line among all the things that I've had any success with, really, is just it's all relationship based. And one of the things I feel so pulled to podcasting as a platform, and podcast guesting obviously is the side that I focus on, is yes, it generates leads. It's good for SEO. You build your email list, you make sales, like all those things happen. But the real differentiator about podcasting is because of the human to human relationship that forms, it always has the potential to have exponential growth because any one relationship can truly kind of change the game and become an inflection point in your business and your life. And I like podcast guesting when you do it systematically. First and foremost, because it's a way to build high quality relationships at scale. So that is to me why it's so vital. And I would say the same thing on the hosting side, which I do, host a podcast as well. So yeah, I think that's the big idea here is like whatever suits you, your personality, your values, it doesn't really matter the application specifically, but the key driver of growth is going to be relationship building. And a lot of people, including me as an introvert, struggle to do that. And so if you put yourself in a environment and a system where you get to do the thing you like to do already, which for many of my clients at least is teaching, coaching, telling stories. If that was a way to build high quality relationships, if you do it very intentionally and you strategically, like, wouldn't that be a cool way to grow your business? And so that's really what we seek to do and make that as easy as possible for our clients. So it's all about relationship building, though, at the end of the day.
So many paths to go down. I love that you mentioned the aspect of being an introvert. I'm not. Everyone knows that. I'm obnoxious. I'm an extrovert. But I've also heard from many introverts that it's not that I don't want to talk to people or can't talk to people. It's that they don't want to be in that out of control. There's 100 variables like showing up at a networking event.
Yes.
That's draining.
Yes.
But when you can control the environment and the interaction, they'll thrive
Yes.
there that way. And you can do that with your own show, with guesting on other shows, and really, especially now, of course, doing it remotely. And that's another piece. And that's what I want to get into a lot on this idea of why this matters so much, guesting, and then why, honestly, I'll pitch it on your behalf, why work with someone like you to go and do this, because there's so many wrong ways to do it. And some are wrong ways, sure. But a lot of them are just missed opportunity ways
Right.
too, that if you don't do certain things, you're almost wasting that time. So let's play there a little bit. Like I think you and I again are on the same page in terms of using this medium as a way to grow your business, market, meet people because it's I don't know, I just feel like it's the most genuine version of doing that we can do. And I've always been wired that way. I understand I can make 1,000 cold calls this month and 3 people might say, "Yeah, I understand that.
right?
I'm just not wired that way. I don't wanna do it."
And you won't do it because it doesn't come natural and it doesn't feel in alignment with your values, and so some people love cold calling, not me, and I think, the introvert thing comes up a lot with guesting is you get to show up and do the thing you already love to do, right? And so for many of the people I work with, they're coaches, they could be a executive consultant, they can be an email marketing expert, they could be a marriage coach, right? Whatever they already like to do, if I said, "What if you just spent all day doing coaching?" The people I work with usually say like, "Oh my gosh, that'd be a dream. Like I'm so good at the thing I do. I just love it. I just don't love marketing." And so our whole paradigm shift is like, what if you just did the thing you love to do and it was your marketing? And if you're an introvert especially, like what if you could do that in one-on-one conversations with people who really want to understand what you do and they want to learn from you as well, and then later on, other people will listen into that, and you put a system around it, and it generates leads like that. That's what I'm trying to do here too. So, yeah. So anyway, sorry for the interjection, but I wanted to kind of expand on that idea of getting to do what you love in it is a kind of a controlled environment where everyone's rooting for you to win. The host wants you to look good and they're not trying to trip you up. But there's also, the ability to think on your feet. You can teach the same thing on 100 podcasts and every podcast is going to be different because it's a human to human interaction, right? It's not recording into an echo chamber. Like you get to have conversations and nuances and empathy and story and emotion and all the stuff that comes from talking to another human. I think that's why we're so drawn to listening to podcasts too, or I know at least that's why I am.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right, and I have to step back when I guess putting myself in the shoes of your ideal folks who are coming into your cohorts, because so many of them, they haven't done this before. They've done 1 or 2 maybe, and that is a piece, and that's where I definitely wanna cover here, some of those myths, and they could come up as objections, but, like, those things that just prevent them from going and doing this on both sides. I've got my answers for for some of those as someone who gets, people reach out to be on the show, but also from what they think it's going to take, just like what you mentioned, like, oh, well, I've only got these couple of stories. Can I really go on all these podcasts? What are some of those other myths that are coming up that kind of hold people back from jumping in?
Yeah, I think to set the stage for this in my seat, where people like you do podcast guesting or you understand podcasting, I actually hear one of two ends of the spectrum, and one that you already said is I've dabbled in this. I'm like aware of it. Maybe I got on one or two shows, sort of through a friend, and I enjoyed it. And I got a client, and that's really cool. But I don't see how I could do this repeatedly or like systematically. The other side, actually, that I hear a lot, which is probably unique and just kind of the role I play in the marketplace, is, "Hey, Dustin, I've been on 100 shows this year. I'm really good at being a guest. I love it. I get so much energy from it, and I have no problem getting on shows. Everyone tells me I'm a great interviewer or interviewee." And I say, "That's amazing. Like, you have a business, right?" "Yeah, I do." "Oh, cool. Like, what's this done for your business?" And there's usually this blank stare of, "I don't know," or really nothing, because I think these are where we meet business owners on podcasts, right? You should enjoy the activity, the podcasting, but you also need to drive a result. And so, like our main program is called the Podcast Profits Accelerator. So it's marrying podcasting as a medium, but also with a very clear objective, which is to grow your business and have profits from it. And so, some of the myths that come up as a result of kind of both those spectrums is people will say, this isn't scalable, right? Like, oh, I did it. It felt like a lot of work, or it was fun, but I don't see how I could do this repeatedly. Or it's not scalable in the sense that I put a lot of time and energy into this, and I am not seeing a return. And so, unlike maybe other digital marketing alternatives like paid ads or SEO or things where people feel like it's more predictable, they may say, "Oh, this podcasting thing is fun. I'm sure I'll, at some point something good's going to come from it," but it doesn't feel like it's predictable. It doesn't feel like I can see a path towards profitability. I think that's a huge myth that we help people address with better systems and better strategy around it. Um, there's lots of myths. There's the myth of I'm I feel like I'm taking, or like it's icky. It's like, oh, I receive all these horrible emails and cold pitches and bad LinkedIn DMs, and like I don't want to be one of those people. I don't want to pester a host and make them feel like they're rejecting me or something. And the flip of that, the reality of that is, no, the host actually is looking for great guests, great content, but you have to approach them in the right way. And you need to come in with the mindset of service. Like, how can I serve this person's audience, add value? And yes, something good's going to come from me or for me as a result. But the main thing is like, how do I create a win-win-win relationship where, yeah, it's good for me, but it's really good for the audience. And therefore, it's most of all good for the host. And that this is a place to serve, not a place you're not taking, you're giving. I think that's a big kind of mindset shift for people when they think about, do they deserve to be in, the guest seat, or who would ever want to hear from them? It's like you have a ton of value to add, and most of that value is actually in your own story, and we just need to like package that up the right way and let you communicate it clearly. So there's many more myths, Jason, but those are the ones that come to mind for me right off the top of the bat that I hear on a daily basis, really.
Oh yeah, that's again the power of going in and getting help through this process. Two major ways in my mind is that packaging their story up for them, helping them. I mean, that's massive. And then that second piece, because I hear the same thing. People go and they'll jump on podcast. I'm like, oh, cool. What's your kind of call to action in there? What do you have people doing? And what do you, they're like, I, I don't know. It's like, well,
Yeah.
yeah, we need to get that figured out because, yeah, there's no reason to do it if you're not, yeah. And not shying away from that fact too, that we all know that's the play here. Like you mentioned, like this is, for profit, right? This is the grow. And everyone wins in that piece. What are some of those best practices when it comes to making the most of that appearance that you kind of help people create and make sure that they're doing?
Yeah. So we think of this and we teach this in sort of a 5-step framework. And so I think if I hit those highlights, it'll enlighten people to maybe if there's a piece of this that they haven't even thought about, or a piece that they're like, oh, I messed that up every time I've tried this, right? So we call them the 5 Ps: purpose, plan, pitch, perform, profit. And real briefly, we start with purpose. I think this is the part that most people skip, and it's really where people get out of alignment with some of those examples I talked about earlier, where they don't see how this is going to serve their business, or they don't have a way to measure ROI. So the first thing we do in purpose is, and this is a very simple question, answer the question for you specifically: why do you want to be a podcast guest, right? And it's like, oh, seems like a simple question. But underlying that question are questions about who's your ideal client, what's the transformation you provide, what's the message that you need to deliver in order to attract that ideal client, right? Like these are all key things. And in the same step with our clients, at least, we set up KPIs. We set up measurable indicators of whether we're winning, like whether this is actually working. So we start with purpose. Once you're clear on why you're doing this and who you're trying to reach, step 2, we call plan, which is basically research, right? It's like finding the right shows to be on. That actually becomes pretty clear once you know why you're doing it, who you're trying to reach. And we've got some, specific processes to help make that as efficient as possible. But step 2 is finding basically a prioritized list of shows that you think you would be a great guest on, that you'd add value, and that it would meet your business objectives. Step 3 is pitch. So, hey, we got this great list of podcasts. Now we have to compel the host to show why we can add value and have us on their show, right? And we could do a whole episode about how to screw up pitches and do it in a yucky way. That's not what we're doing. We're doing it in a warm, intentional way. But step 3 is just basically reaching out to the host and getting that invitation. Step 4 is perform. So congratulations, they said yes, you're going to be on the show. And then that's where sort of the art and science of how to be an effective interviewee takes place, right? So how do you introduce yourself? What's your positioning for this show? Like, who are you in this show? Because we all have many different versions of ourselves and stories to tell. What stories do we tell? And you already keyed on it. The most critical thing is, what's the call to action? So if someone gets listening and they're really invested in you and they like you and they trust you and they're like, I need to know more about this. Like, you've got to tell them what to do next, and you have to do it very directly. So that's step 4. And then step 5 is profit. And so in our world, the key to doing this well and knowing that the results are there is it's generating revenue for your business, right? And so, just to give context for the listener, we work with people for 90 days typically, and we take care of the first 4 Ps in 30 days. So it really doesn't take that long to get their message dialed in, find the shows, pitch the shows, and start doing great interviews. We spend 60 days, like 2/3 of our time with these entrepreneurs is spent on the profit part, which is all the different ways you can leverage each podcast guesting opportunity that you get to move the needle and grow your business, right? So those are the 5 Ps, Jason, that I talk a lot about. And I think that always gives people good context because they may be like, oh, I hadn't even thought about, there's certain things I should do when I'm on the show, or I had never even considered why I'm doing this in the first place. And people jump right into, I found the show, I found 100 shows, I did all these interviews, and it's like, for what? And it's like, once you understand why you're doing it, then you know if you're doing it the right way and if it's actually getting the results that you're hoping for.
Oh, that's fantastic. Both in that inside aha, but I love just the order and how that's you take people through that process because it does once you answer purpose at that beginning, yeah, that just informs everything else.
Yeah.
It's so critical to get that down. I want to dig in a minute to some examples if you can share of more what all the ways that you can profit. Just a few examples of that maybe we're not thinking of. But also let's kind of back and forth a little bit from the point of view of podcast host and helping people with the podcast guesting. When you're having them reach out, is it usually themselves? Is there kind of a formula for that you kind of guide them through? Because I know
Yeah.
some people use PR firms or some equivalent, or they do it themselves. And as a host, I'm kind of indifferent when it comes. I don't know. I'll give some of my thoughts in a minute, but we'll
Yeah,
take a guide
I'd
through that.
I'd love your perspective on this. In the way that I prefer to do this, the way that I've had success, and we've had 220-ish people go through our program at this point. So I've got a good sample size to see what works and what doesn't work. I'm a big advocate of doing this yourself, meaning it comes from you personally, right? Part of what we do with entrepreneurs is we actually help them use a virtual assistant to do a lot of the legwork once we've dialed in sort of the high level messaging and strategy with the entrepreneur themselves. So when I say quote unquote do it yourself, I don't mean that you are writing emails from scratch and sending them all out, but it is you and your voice from your individual email address. And the whole posture about this is like, hey, Jason, here's how I think I could serve your audience. Like, that's the posture. It's not the posture of what most booking agencies or PR agencies do, which is Dustin Riechmann is God's gift to business. And like, he's a New York Times, blah, blah, blah. And he was on the Today Show and blah, blah. Like, you would be honored to get 5 minutes of time with Dustin. Like, it's not that at all. So it comes from a place of service, humility, but also authority. Like I'm going to tell you, like, here's what I can teach your audience. Here's what I think this is going to add unique value to your program. Like we're going to be assertive, but we're going to do it from a place of service. And as far as structure goes, I think it's like a 3-piece formula, and you can apply this in a lot of different formats, LinkedIn, video, email. But if we just think of it real simply as in email, this email is going to first and foremost be custom and tied to that host. So our whole approach is quality over quantity. We're not sending 500 cold pitch emails and hope that one of them says yes. It is very intentionally written to Jason in this example. And I'm going to do anything I can in the opening to this message to connect with you on a personal basis. We call it a relational anchor, and that could be, a takeaway from a previous episode. I know, like you just said, Qasim Aslam. If I was pitching Jason for this, I'd say, hey, I actually know Qasim. He's amazing. So cool that you had this interview with him. I took this away for the first time, even though I'd known Qasim for a while. Great job, Jason. Well, now you're like, okay, this is a real human. He actually cares about me and gave me some insight. And now I kind of have permission to say, here's how I think I could be a good guest and add some value to your show. So second part of this email after we've done the relational anchor is a bullet point summary, 3 to 5 bullet points of exactly what I want to teach your audience and what I want to share with your audience, right? And we craft these to be compelling. There's some copywriting involved. just to make sure that when the host sees them, they're like, oh my gosh, I got to know more about that, right? So they're curiosity inducing, and they are written from a place of credibility and authority. And then the closing part of this message is a call to action. So just like on the interview, you need to ask for what you want. So you need to ask if they're interested in having you as a guest, right? So that's really it, though. It's relational anchor. What's in it for them, meaning the host reading this email. What's in it for their audience, and then a simple call to action. And you can send this in an email. You can send this in a couple of DMs on LinkedIn. You kind of break it up into different pieces of the conversation. Some people, their brand or their audience is more video oriented or Instagram oriented. So doing a selfie video version of this is awesome, or you can screen share and do a Loom video. So there's different ways to deliver it. I don't want people to get caught up on that. The main thing is be intentional, actually care about the person who's receiving it, send it from you from a place of service, and ask for what you want. I think if you do that, our typical acceptance rates are 30 to 40%. I know cold outreach agencies are, podcast booking agencies is 2 to 5%, so it's a much more effective way. And the person receiving it actually feels like valued, and they're much more interested in having this conversation than if they feel like they're just a number and you're just churning and burning through a bunch of outreach.
Yeah. Are you sending something along with that? Link to information, a one pager, anything like that?
We do not. The master pitch, as I like to do the first version, is exactly what I said, plain text email. I'll put my name at the end, and I may link like sevenfigureleap.com just so they can have some context on who is this person. We do have a media kit, but typically we don't even introduce that until the host says, send me more information, or yeah, I think this would be great. Do you have, contact, you have a headshot and a bio I could review? Or often we don't even use it until we've booked the show and they say, hey, we need some, onboarding sort of information for the show. So again, it's totally a posture thing. I, I know when I receive these, of course, I receive a ton of these too. If it leads with, here's my bio, or here's my media kit, here's my, there's a PDF attached to this. For one, it hurts deliverability, and two, it sets the wrong tone, and it's like, it's I don't know. It's just that comes from a PR agency, and we're trying to very intentionally show we're not a PR agency. I am Dustin, and I want to serve Jason in your audience, so I'm sending this as Dustin, and it just doesn't feel like natural to me to send a one pager in the very first interaction we've ever had.
Yeah. I think there's a middle ground to it because I totally agree on the one pager. I'm not, I'm indifferent to receiving one. Like that doesn't bother me or whatever. But what drives me up the wall is no link, no info, no way to find out more in that moment. Because I don't know, you may have a great pitch, cool. Let me see your LinkedIn. Let me see like. It's just those natural things. And I mean, I'm talking to someone recently, and they purposefully don't do that. And I'm telling you, like, well, from the point of view of a host you're trying to reach, it's infuriating to everything plays into it, right? Like you said, attaching a PDF, having links, anything like that plays into deliverability. So that's definitely something to think about. I think there's a play to almost have a link or info in a Google Doc that you link to that Gmail will love, right? So there's
Yes.
a way around that.
Yes. I like that a lot. That's great.
So just a something, right? Just a okay, you say all this stuff, but let me see.
Yeah.
In that moment, and just like you mentioned, any podcast host out there, there's just it seems like to be a real uptick in the last 3 or 4 months as well. But like this uptick in just constant outreach from PR firms and blah blah blah.
I'm typically having my a single link. In my case, usually the homepage, but then my homepage basically is written like it's a story branded version of who I am and how I'm a guide to these types of topics. So if you go to my homepage, like you pretty quickly like, oh, he does, everything he says is true. Here's the credibility markers. Here's, excerpts from client testimonials and all that stuff. So yeah, it's a great point, Jason. Like you don't want to make the host work for it, right? You don't want to make them do the work. You want to basically hand them the feeling as a recipient should be, this person's cool. I like them. They like me. This is really unique. I really like the angle they've taken with these bullet points. And you really want the host to be like, this guy or gal has already written like the show outline for me. This is an easy yes. And then yes, the ability to verify, okay, they actually are who they say they are. I can look at their LinkedIn. I probably take it for granted too. I have such a unique name. There's only one of me on LinkedIn, but Jason Croft, there's probably a lot of you. So having a direct link to external verification, like that probably makes a lot of sense.
There's only one, the Jason Croft, though.
Yes,
Come on.
that's true.
Come
Yes.
on, Dustin. But
Yes. I'm actually looking at your LinkedIn. It is the Jason Croft. So that makes it
that's
easy.
right.
So
There you go. Yeah, it's so funny. I mean, obviously, there's the horrible ones, there's the laughable ones. I've been trying to figure out where this came from because it's obviously an AI aspect, but there have been a series that are, "Hey, Jason and Fred, in your upcoming," just like, where what metadata are they pulling from? I'm fascinated to figure it out. I've had one guest named Fred in the past, like years ago. You know what I mean? So it's just,
yeah, that's bizarre. I live in a little town that is outside of St. Louis, Missouri, but I live in Illinois. And so I get these pitches that are like, "Hey, I love Chicago," or like, "How's the weather? Is it snowing in Chicago today?" And I'm like 5 hours from Chicago, and it's July, so it's definitely not snowing. And so yeah, the AI overplay is definitely a real thing. So.
oh yeah. I will say, I have someone coming up. I think I'm interviewing him this week. I responded just because I had to know how he did it. It is so good. I'm interviewing him, and he's got this whole software platform. It's looks really strong, looks really great, and he's using his own platform because obviously when we jumped on a call in Canal, I was just like, I got to know how you did this because there was just enough, pull from episodes stuff that I knew it was because I'm deep in this, but it was good. It
Yeah,
was really good. And that's really his service in the marketing sales world overall. And he's just applying that to the podcast guesting aspect. I was like,
love it. I'll have to look for that one. So
lastly, before we get into some of those business building aspects, I think again back and forth a little bit of when you're showing up as a guest to, just like there are 100 different types of ways that you can guest and different people and personalities, different hosts have those as well. And the pros that I watch, going being a guest from, watching Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt being interviewed by somebody horrendous, but they're a pro and
yeah,
they roll with it, right? All the way down to somebody who it's their first time. You're going to get these different plays, and that's a big piece of it. Now, I'd love to get your thoughts on how you kind of guide people to be ready for it, because I know for me as a host, I want someone. You're a phenomenal guest. Obviously, I would expect nothing less. Does the from not just the conversation we've had before, but of course, where you're teaching. That would be bad. It's like Dustin's really bad at this. Man,
yeah. Clients
why is he
listening, they're like,
teaching?
"You didn't even have a call to action." Or, it's like he hammers us
Exactly.
on this every day. Yeah, yeah.
Right. But I love that. Just get on and riff. I've had people, and I've just this has been how I've been from my very first show a decade ago till now. I don't have a list of questions. We go down the list. Some hosts do. Some guests freak out if there's not a list of questions. Some despise it. How do you kind of guide people to prep for both and be able to roll with it?
Part of the prep starts in step 3, which is the pitch, right? And so, yes, it should be a conversation. It's organically going to go different places. But in general, if someone's done outreach and they've said, "Here's the 3 things I want to teach your audience," the host is generally going to kind of follow that, at least as just the general outline. And the other thing I would say, if someone's kind of nervous about this idea, is the host does want you to look good, right? Like this is not a game of gotcha or trying to trip someone up. And so, there's those ideas of mindset of like, this is going to be a positive experience. It's just a conversation with someone cool. They already know what I'm coming to talk about, right? Like, we're not trying to surprise each other, and you should prepare. And so, what I typically say, if someone's new, listen to 3 full episodes and really understand the personality and the nuance. If you're doing this on a more regular basis and you're more of a veteran at this, I still like to go and listen to at least the first 10 minutes and last 10 minutes of the last one or two episodes, because the critical times in the interview are typically the beginning at the introduction, and then at the end, like how do they set me up for a call to action, or how do they handle the closeout of the show? And then the things in the middle are typically the teaching time, the storytelling, and that's a little more natural. So listen to the first 10 minutes, last 10 minutes of a recent interview, so you're like good. I've literally had shows where I booked it, and then 6 months later when we actually recorded, it was a different host. So like, and then if there is like you'll quickly know if they ask the same questions, or they have a lightning round at the end where they ask the same three questions to close out the show. Like, you don't want to get caught off guard by those things, but that's really easy. Just listen on the morning walk. Another thing that we do, I'll admit to my clients listening, I don't have one, but typically we'll recommend, especially if this is something newer, we call it the magic post-it note. And it's literally, as you're doing this prep and you're listening to the most recent episodes, have a very simple post-it note that you can put on your computer that has the host name and how to pronounce it, because that can be really awkward if their name shows up as host and you're like, oh crap, what's their name? Like, this is so embarrassing. And then it will have your couple of key stories that you want to, kind of remind yourself this. I want to make sure that I teach these things. And then it's going to have your call to action on there, so you don't forget the URL or wherever you're trying to send people at the end. And then if there's like a lightning round or just some sort of nuance with this show or this host, it's right there on the post-it note. I like to do that and have clients do that. Sort of the LeBron James, he walks onto the NBA court before every game. He takes the talcum powder and he blows it up in the air, and he's like putting on his alter ego. He's stepping into the professional identity of like game on. And that's the same thing for podcasting, right? It's like, I want to lock in, break out distractions. This post-it note is sort of like my statement to myself that I'm ready, and it's a bit of a security blanket. So if you feel like you blank out, or like, oh my gosh, I'm freaking out, I don't remember what the call to action was supposed to be, you can glance down at it very innocently, and go on your way. So those are some of the things that we help people kind of prepare in the moment. In our program, we do things like put people in breakout rooms and do mock interviews and have you practice introducing yourself and telling your origin story, because those are going to be pretty much constant in every interview, right? And we actually give people um, sort of a structure to which stories to tell in a given interview, just so they have that sort of go-to content that they know they can kind of use at any time. It doesn't always come up in every interview. This interview is much more free form. We're kind of talking inside baseball. But I have stories that I can often just kind of pull out of the quiver and say, oh, here's an example of that. And so that's how we help people prepare. And go-to stories, a post-it note, some practice, doing some mock interviews, and then just that basic preparation of listening to a recent episode. It's really as simple as that.
I love that you're doing the mock interviews in there, because there is no substitute for just doing the reps.
I meant to say, I'm sorry. If you're new and you're like, oh man, I don't know if I'm ready, well, just go get on 3 or 5 small shows, fringe shows, just get the reps in, right? Like, the way you're going to get better at thinking on your feet and being interviewed is by doing more interviews. And one of the big side benefits of doing podcasting is it gets you more clear in your messaging, right? And so there's no substitute for improving your marketing, your clarity, your messaging than getting asked questions about what you do repeatedly. And in that, you'll find the hooks, you'll find the stories that the host really resonates with. And so just do it repeatedly is the real answer here. But if you're nervous to even start, then do all the things I talked about just to prepare and make sure that you have the confidence going into your first few interviews.
Oh yeah, and I'll add to that, it's the last thing anyone wants to do, and it's so critical whether you're hosting your own show or you're guesting. Yes, do the reps over and over and listen and watch every single one back.
Yes.
It's the
Cringe and do it anyway, right? Yeah.
exactly. It's the none of us, except me now, I love my voice now. None of us, when we're starting out, ever we start hearing our voice for the first time often.
Yes.
We hate it. I cannot tell you the amount of times I'm listening to a show back from my first show, Startup Dallas, way back in the day, and just I'm yelling at myself in the car, like, "What are you doing? Finish a sentence, man!" Like, just angry, can't stand my voice, all of that. But that was so critical because in the moment, I didn't remember going a whole interview, not finishing sentences.
Yeah, or taking a breath or right, yeah.
Yeah, and you'll find those words, those ums, you knows, all of that, and the only way you're going to improve on that is if you listen to it back, and the amazing thing that happens, this goes so far beyond podcasting, is that you become a better communicator on Zoom calls, in person, everything when you do that. Like, somebody I know very recently, and they're just like, "Yeah, I've done it 100, I'm just gonna keep getting better at it." Like, well, obviously, you're not listening back because you're not getting better at it, and I
If you're 100 in and you still sound like this, there's an issue, right? Yeah.
right, and I know that's the reason, right? It's awesome. You're better off that you're doing the reps, but you gotta listen back. You gotta it's game tape, right?
I was
It's
gonna say,
going through and getting better.
yeah, be a pro, review your game tape. I 100% agree with that, and I'll admit I don't do that with every interview, but the what I would call kind of the keystone interviews, like interviews where it did result in something, big, or an interview where maybe we touched on something new. I've been interviewed 100 times, and so it's really interesting when someone kind of goes down a new tangent. I find that very exciting as someone who's done this a lot. That can be terrifying for someone who's not prepared for it. I love to go back and listen to those interviews because then I'm like, how why do we go there? What am I excited when I hear this topic? Because it's like the fodder for the next interview or the next LinkedIn post. Because there's something magical that gets captured in some of these moments, and if you are resistant to it and you just kind of put your head down and say, I don't want to listen back to that, you're going to miss a lot of value that you could be garnering from this process.
And I love the little Post-it note aspect too. That's where my head went with it too, is even if you never use it, it's just that, like, that little safety net, especially in the beginning. Another little inside baseball real fast, but the only time this was fascinating learning for me, the only time I ever prepped a list of questions, I was doing the an interview live, like studio audience live for the first time. And, we're in person, group of folks, and I didn't even know why I did. I was just like, I'm just gonna extra prep, right? We're doing this. And I realized there in the moment that when I'm usually doing these, I've got kind of two tracks going. One is I'm listening to the guest. Oh, that's amazing. Oh, cool. That's the other track is, oh, that's a good point. Oh, I could go this direction with that. Oh, I could
Mhm.
take this. Oh, yeah, maybe we'll hit that. Well, when I was live in front of that audience, that second track was taken up with, oh, they laughed at that. Oh, the audience is, are they into it? Are they watching? So answer ends. And I'm like, so, like, thank goodness I
Reviews,
had that.
notes, yeah, awkward pause, yeah.
Yeah, that little safety net in there. That was a fascinating little learning. So, like, that safety nets can be good.
Yeah, well, you notice, the great interviewers, the late night host or Larry King, what they have cards, like, they do prepare and they do think through, and I'm sure I've never seen one of those cards, but I'm sure there's a sort of a decision tree sort of effect of like, "Hey, if we go here, here's a question I wanna make sure I get in," if we go here, I wanna make sure I kinda dig into this personal story or something like that I'm fascinated with, and again, you can do that as a guest as well. The thing as a guest is this is the final thing I'll say. I'm sure we want to, get into the profit and stuff, but if you're a guest, you do have agency. I think that's something that guests forget is like, well, I'm not the host. You're not the host, but you can answer questions the way that you feel like they should be answered, right? And so not everything has to be a direct yes and no or sort of like scripted answer to a single question. You can take that question and bridge it into a story that you really want to get into the interview that maybe they're not thinking to ask you in the moment. And so I always tell our guests that it's like you do have agency, like you are an equal part, and in most cases you're going to be 75-80% of the actual words on the podcast. So give yourself a little creative freedom in how you respond to some of these questions too.
That's really important. I hadn't even thought about that. That's an empowering piece, especially when you're first doing that, to have that reminder. it's less confrontational and dramatic than what's going through your head right now, listener. As you bring that up, it's not
Yeah.
the politician dodging a question because
Right.
they're trying to get them in a corner. It's nothing like that, but it could be something that I know how powerful. Like this core story is everything. I'm gonna make sure I get it there. That's a
Yes.
great point. Yeah. Before we wrap up, let's if you could give some ideas of more than hey, go to this website and download my PDF. Like that's where my head goes when I think, oh, have a call to action, have a lead mag. What are these other ways to really make this whole thing profitable as you go through it?
Yeah. So the big idea here, what we like to create with clients, when I would encourage anyone to create their version of this, is a flywheel effect, a marketing flywheel. And so the whole idea is, if you're going to put the energy in through an interview and your expertise, you want that to drive not just listener downloads of the lead magnet of the call to action. Like, you should definitely do that. Like, that should be a part of the equation. But there's a lot more opportunity available beyond that. And so, we don't have the benefit of a visual here, but if the listener can kind of put a circle in their mind, like a merry-go-round, and just think of wedges going around the outside of it, and so it will start with the interview starts to spin this merry-go-round. It starts to spin this flywheel, right? And as we work our way around the outside and start to like increase the velocity of this thing spinning, we do have an email list component that we want to grow, and that's going to come from the call to action. We do have direct sales that can absolutely happen. I'd say those two wedges are really the listener. So, like, how do we call the listener to action and get them to get on our email list and maybe buy something from us if they're ready? But then if you proceed from there, this is the part where people usually don't see it. Um, this is where the other relationships come into play. So a key relationship that's going to be in every interview you ever do is the host relationship, right? So what can I do to deepen the relationship with this host? Leave them a review, say kind things, share their stuff on social media. They're going to be a referral source for you almost by default. I've had lots of people become clients after we've done an interview because they're like, "Oh, like this is really good. I should actually do this for my business," because we built a great rapport and I showed up and I was professional. So the host is a big one. The guest list is the one I want to actually jump into for another minute here, Jason. So I'll come back to that. But there's all these other opportunities with other guests on this show that everyone pretty much overlooks. But if we complete the analogy here, after the guest list, another wedge here is content repurposing, right? And so a lot of people, they record the interview, it goes live, and they're like, "That was cool," and there's so much more you could be doing with that same content. So especially with AI tools and everything. So if you're writing a newsletter or doing LinkedIn, you have a YouTube channel, this can be the source of so much of your content is being interviewed and pulling out the golden nuggets from those interviews to feed the other things. And then the kind of loop closer here, the bottom of this wheel that we're talking about is authority. And so the idea is, as I do one interview, I grow my email list, make some sales, have another relationship with a great host, this whole guest list thing that we're going to talk a little bit about. I've got content to repurpose. All of this serves to grow my authority, right? And now that I have more authority, I can get on the next show more easily and I can get on bigger shows, right? And so if you just kind of continue to spin this wheel, the idea is it's building momentum so that every time you do a podcast guesting appearance and you're doing it systematically, you get on bigger shows and it's easier to get on, to the point that, frankly, I don't think I've sent a cold, or quote unquote cold. I don't think I've sent a proactive outreach to a host in like 2 years. And why is that? It's because I have more authority now and I get referred to people. Some of these other strategies that we do with the host and the guest list, it shortcuts this whole process to where step 3 in the 5 Ps kind of goes away. It's like you don't really have to pitch because you've got enough authority that people are coming to you, and it really becomes a virtuous cycle. So that's kind of the big idea, of that. This is multifaceted. There's a lot that you can feed from every given interview you do. And is it okay if I jump into the guest list, or do you have a question about the flywheel kind of overall?
Let's jump in there. I just want to add on to when you're talking about that content repurposing, something I don't do as much as well. It's not just when this episode goes out, like the day you record it, take a screenshot, do this. Hey, I was just on, that feeds it all as well. Oh, this is about to come out. Now it's coming. You can extend that as well. And to add on to your point, if you are on a show, you do promote, put these elements out on your own, of course, interact with the hosts, promotion of that show, but on your own, do that. You will stand out as a guest.
Yes.
It makes zero sense to me. I don't understand it, but people be peoplein', and it is insanely rare for someone to go and promote their episode that they were on with your show. It's feelings aren't hurt. It's happened way too long. Like, it's just like, I don't get it, but it just happens. So when you do that, you can really stand out.
Yeah, if you want to be a top 1% guest, here's the insider secret. Obviously prepare and, do a good job on your interview. But number 2, when the thing gets published, go leave a 5-star review on your platform of choice, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever. And then thank the host. Tell them you left them a 5-star review, like a written review, and then share it on your social media channel of choice. Like, as simple and silly as that sounds, and you can attest to this as a host too, Jason, like, top for sure the top 5%, if not the top 1%. And so when you do that, then if I go to Jason, I'm like, hey, this was awesome. I just left you a 5-star rating and really appreciate everything that you do. I've got it queued up. I'm going to be sharing it on LinkedIn tomorrow. If I was to make an ask, like, is there any other shows that you think my content would fit on? Guess what? Podcast hosts, no other podcast hosts. They're also guests, and it's a very tight knit community when you get into podcasting. And it doesn't take much to stand out and be remembered as like, that's a really good dude. He was a really quality guest and he left me a review, and no one leaves me reviews. So like that's a very simple thing that you can do. Just make it part of your standard procedures. Every time we get one published, it comes to me. I bookmark it so I can always have reference to it. And I get on my own phone with my own words and I leave a quick rating. And then we let the host know, and we share it on social. So I'm glad we keyed on that wedge of the host relationship. Guest list, real quick. I know we're short here. Big idea here is, if you're on a show and they do interviews, you're not the only one being interviewed, right? And so just think about or look at the list of other guests that have been on this show, and keep in mind that these shows are typically interviewing new people every week. So this becomes an evergreen source of relationship building. And so what we like to do is we're on a show, it gets published. We're going to go look and see who else has been on that show that we might want to have a relationship with, right? And these relationships kind of fall into 3 buckets. So this individual could be a potential client. They could be a potential partner. So maybe they do something that would be complementary to the work that we do, or they could have a platform. Many of the people being interviewed also have podcasts, right? And they also have YouTube channels or LinkedIn followings. And so you can go through very easily and say, Jason's a potential partner and Jill's a potential podcast host because she has a great show. And Jimmy he actually could be a potential client. He seems like he's like right in our ideal client profile. And then you have this evergreen growing list of people that you're in the cool kids club with, because you both have the shared visibility and authority of being on a show. And then you can simply reach out, like on LinkedIn, do a connection request and say, hey, Jason, you and I are both on Pat's show. Great job. I'd really love to connect with you. Get about 80% of people say yes to that, because it's a warm reason to reach out. And then from there, the conversation can ensue however it should, depending on which bucket they're in. So this is a whole strategy that we help people actually implement and do on a scalable way. But it's like every podcast that you do, if it's with the right market and you have the right approach to it, can open up many different relationship avenues that can lead to really, really big things for your business.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's been in the, I don't know, on the outskirts of my head of just like, oh yeah, that's a thing, but never put so purposefully and succinctly as that. And then that last part of, yeah, and then times every show that you go on, you
Yeah, so if
know.
you're on a show a week, now you've got 50 hosts a year that you're developing relationships with, and if they have 100 guests, that's whatever, that's 5,000 or something. There's a lot of individuals there. If you're a host too, something that we started doing, Jason, I'm doing interviews as well. Some of these interviews are clients. Some of these interviews are coaching sort of opportunities where I'm helping someone with the stuff that we do. And then some of them are more aspirational, where it's an author or someone I really want to connect with, and it's a way to build a relationship with them. And so in our community, which is, people that are clients of ours, we do quarterly networking events for our clients. And so we get everyone together on Zoom and we have a really cool networking event. So what I've started to do is the guests from that quarter, I say, hey, why don't you come to our networking event? And so it's sort of a VIP invitation. This is for clients only, but because you're a guest on the show, I want to invite you in. Our clients love it because these people are all amazing people and a lot of them have podcasts. And of course, the person being invited gets a taste of what we do in our community. So, some of those folks end up signing up to become clients. It's just a simple value add. And it's like it takes very little effort to do that. Or another version of this is if you're going to speak at a conference, make a connection with all the other speakers before, during, or after the conference, right? Like host a dinner and invite some of your favorite speakers to come to the dinner. Because you're in the cool kids club, again, like I think people lose sight of the fact that by being a guest or a host or a conference speaker, you have so much sort of power available to you to be a connector and bring other people together. And you have a very good excuse to do that because it's like, oh, we all have something in common. It happens to be this podcast that we have in common, and people are very receptive to that. So there's a lot more we could share on that, at a different time. But the whole idea of building relationships, to go all the way back to the beginning of this interview, there's so many ways to enrich and build relationships, and I think podcasting opens up, just a plethora of ideas and ways to do this and do the thing that feels natural and vibes with your personality. But what you shouldn't do, in my opinion, is do the interview, have it be published, and have that be the end of the story. That's the beginning of the story. 10% of this is getting on the right shows and doing a good job. 90% is all the stuff you can do with it after the fact. And I hope that's one of the things people take away from our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that piece to give people that permission, whether in that speaking role, the guest role, like just take it, right? Take take the lead on something like that. And it's just because it's waiting for someone to take that and just make your own group of, hey, people who have been on the show of so and so. You could even go that far with it, but it's just again, one more way to reach out, build these relationships that actually there's just at least this much reason, quote unquote, right? you just start to connect with folks. I love it. So give us your call to action.
Yeah, I do have a call to action. And really what this is for, if someone's listening and they're like, hey, I think this podcast guesting thing is something I should explore more deeply. The 5 Ps that I referenced earlier is exactly what we teach. And we put together this podcast profits playbook. It is literally going through each of those 5 Ps. It's got a workbook basically for each of those, very simple 1-pager. So you can get clear on your purpose. You can find the first 10 podcasts you want to be on. We help you write your pitch. We give you all of the, templates and AI tools and stuff to do that, coach you through how to be an effective interviewee. And then we actually get into this guest list strategy and guide you through how to do this the first time. We do all that for free. My business model is basically give you everything so you can do it yourself. And then if you're like, I'd actually like Dustin's personal help, I'd like to be in community, I want to get the shortcut version, that's what people pay us to do. But this free version is sevenfigureleap.com/start. So yeah, 7-Figure Leap with the number. If you're watching the video, you can see it over my shoulder. 7figureleap.com/start. You just plug in your email and we'll start delivering 1 email a day for 5 days to walk you through those 5 Ps and let you get up and start building your own momentum with this strategy.
Fantastic. We'll have all that in the show notes as well. I love it. I recommend everyone go check this out. Download this as a start. Jump in, work with us. I love your approach, both on certainly that giving aspect, but as you guide people through this, you can tell in this interview right here that your mind just expands on what's possible with this. So
Absolutely.
been awesome. Dustin, thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, my pleasure, Jason. Always love to connect with someone who's passionate about podcasting. It's fun to kind of get behind the scenes with some of the stuff that we've experienced. And yeah, hopefully people got some value and kind of open their mind up to the possibilities of how they can build better relationships and grow their business. And, hosting, guesting, podcasting is definitely a winning strategy. And so hopefully everyone got some actionable takeaways so they can go make that happen.
Absolutely. All right. See you all next time. Thanks for joining us on Strategy in Action. Remember, true industry leaders don't chase opportunities, they attract them. Want to build your own market gravity? Visit MediaLeadsCo.com. See you next time.